without further ado, I'm going to introduce Joe Comello. See, on the agenda, Joe is with Healthcare Preparedness Program Planning and Logistics. He is the coordinator for that program under the Office of Emergency Medical Services, the Division of Health Service Regulation. As a part of this presentation, coming on a little bit later will be Nicholas Thorpe. You'll see him on the agenda as well. He's with Emergency Planning and his title is Emergency Planning and Exercise Specialist with CAPRAC, Healthcare Preparedness Coalition. And he'll explain what all that is. Most of you already know, but he'll be coming up after Joe.
Thank you, Beth. I want to thank you for giving me the opportunity to come speak to the group today. You and Dennis and Jeff, really appreciate the opportunity to be here to do this presentation. Like she said, I'm Joe Comello. I'm with the North Carolina Office of Emergency Medical Services. I wanted to talk to you today about how our program, the Healthcare Preparedness Program, tries to effectively leverage our resources to support critical infrastructure in the state of North Carolina, and senior living associations, senior living facilities are part of that critical infrastructure, supporting the health and medical needs for the people in North Carolina. Today what we're going to cover, we're going to go over an overview of emergency management, give you an overview of the Healthcare Preparedness Program itself. I need to put my glasses on. Our resources that the HPP has available. I'll talk to you a little bit about the North Carolina Risk Management Portal, which is a tool that you can use to improve your preparedness. Then Nicholas is going to get up and talk to you about the Healthcare Preparedness Coalitions and what kind of resources and support they can provide. He'll also talk a little bit about the CMS Emergency Preparedness Rule, give you an overview of that, and then we'll take your questions. So, there we go. So, an increased commitment to prepare for emergencies has historically never materialized until after the occurrence of a disaster. Any of you familiar with this quote? Have experienced this quote? This is a common concern and a problem that emergency management and planning try to resolve. We don't want to be doing it this way. So emergency management, what is it? It's a managerial function that creates the framework for organizations to reduce vulnerability to hazards and recover from disasters. It is also an integrated all hazards approach to manage emergencies, utilizing response programs and activities. So in other words, what emergency management is, it's a combination of managed programs and activities focused on reducing vulnerability to identified hazards. You identify your hazards, you see what things you have that protect you from those hazards, what's left over is your vulnerability. Emergency management also believes two important things, that how you prepare for one disaster or emergency situation is the same for any other disaster. So whether you are trying to make decisions on whether to shelter in place or evacuate because you've lost power or that a chemical has been released somewhere in your community, the hazard is you're doing the same function. You're evacuating or you're sheltering in place. Also, what we believe in emergency management is that preparedness can be achieved through thoughtful planning before a disaster, and that's what we ask all facilities like yours to do, is sit down and think about that, think about your hazards, your vulnerabilities, identifying your risk to those hazards, and then plan accordingly. So, emergency management is organized into processes, 4 phases: preparedness, response, recovery, and mitigation. Today we're going to be talking mainly about preparedness. So what is preparedness? Preparedness, or what kind of things are we doing during preparedness? This is where we're creating our plans, our memorandums of agreement, based on our identified risks to respond and recover from whatever the hazard happens to be. So here we are creating our plans, we are training on our plans, we are exercising our plans, and we're sharing our plans with our community, with our residents families, and so forth, so everybody is on the same page. Then moving on to the response phase. Response, something's happened. Okay, this is where we are implementing those plans and agreements that we have sat down and went through and created. During this phase, what we're doing is we're saving lives. We are trying to stabilize the situation. We're trying to preserve property. We're actually acting out. We are executing those plans that we've put together. As we move from the response phase to the recovery phase, we start looking at how we get back to normal. So we've made it through what the event is, or whatever the new normal might be, depending on what happened during the response phase. So recovery, what you're looking at is, and you need to have plans for recovery as well. How are you going to recover economically? During recovery, you're looking at debris management, you're looking at housing, how you're going to restore housing, how are you going to restore health and medical services, how are you going to restore your services to your residents. Moving through recovery, we move into the mitigation phase, and mitigation is where we are doing or looking at what happened. We're taking a after action, lessons learned approach to, well, we had a plan, this happened, how did it go? There were good things that happened, bad things that happened, what are those? And then we are educating ourselves, the public. We're creating, or maybe doing a better or more thorough or an additional hazard assessment. We're making any kind of infrastructure improvements. Maybe we need to have a generator, or we need to have a bigger generator, or we need to have a transfer switch, or so forth. And we're making those changes. And those things, those lessons we've learned now, feed back into preparedness, and we're rewriting plans. We're training and exercising on those rewritten plans, and we're getting ready for what happens next. So you can see that it is a cycle, hopefully, a cycle of constant improvement. We're getting better all the time. Excuse me. All right. The Healthcare Preparedness Program is part of the larger emergency management system. The HPP and programs like it, the public health program, is administered by federal agencies concerned with the preservation and the resilience of health and medical services to the public. Programs primarily fall under Department of Homeland Security, FEMA, CDC, and the Department of Health and Human Services. The HPP falls under the Department of Health and Human Services under the ASPR, which is the Office of the Assistant Secretary for Preparedness and Response. This is a conceptual diagram of your healthcare coalition, or what the healthcare coalition is supposed to be made up of. The healthcare coalition is ASPR's primary organization for the development and strengthening of healthcare system resiliency. That is the ability to continue functioning effectively after a disaster. The Healthcare Coalition is a focal point for health and medical preparedness across disciplines on the regional level, and a clearinghouse for planning, information sharing, training, and in North Carolina, operational resources. One thing I want you to notice, you have it's a little hard to read, but I know you all, have handouts. One thing I want to point out here is the Healthcare Coalition is not just what we call the Big Four: EMS, hospitals, public health departments, and emergency management. But the concept is to be inclusive of behavioral health, and mental health organizations, outpatient facilities, long-term care facilities, like the Senior Living Association represents, other community partners, local government, private physicians, health centers, both rural and community health, as well as home health agencies. So the concept is comprehensive coverage for health and medical preparedness and resiliency. So if you're in that bubble, and I think you are, you have a seat at the Healthcare Coalition table. Okay. This is the mission, vision, values, and goals of the North Carolina Healthcare Preparedness Program. I'm not going to read those to you, but what I want you to know is they focus on supporting the core capabilities of the Healthcare Preparedness Program and the broader goals through our healthcare coalitions. So those core capabilities are, the first one is Foundation for Healthcare and Medical Readiness. The broad goal of this capability is the establishment of sustainable healthcare coalitions to address gaps in planning, training, exercising, and managing resources. So basically, support and sustainment of healthcare coalitions throughout the state. Our second core capability is healthcare and medical response coordination. The broader goal here is establishment of plans and systems that allow healthcare organizations to share information, resources, and coordinate to deliver medical care during emergencies. So planning and readiness of facilities like yours. Third is continuity of healthcare services delivery. The broader goal here is healthcare organizations that with trained and educated workers that have tested and approved plans. So that is the focus that we want from our third capability. And four puts all those together. It's medical surge. And the broader goal there is healthcare organizations that are capable of delivering care when demand for services exceeds capacity. So like I said earlier, to implement these core capabilities throughout the state, we work through our healthcare coalitions, and they are depicted on this map. We have 8 throughout the state. As you can see on your handouts, if you look on the, starting from the west, in orange, we have the Mountain Healthcare Preparedness Coalition. They are based out of Flat Rock. Peach is Triad. They are based out of Mocksville. Fuchsia is Metrolina, based out of Charlotte. Dark blue, of course, is Duke, based out of Durham. Mid-Carolina, of course, is light blue. They're based out of Chapel Hill. The capital area RAC is also colored significantly red, deep red, and they are based out of Raleigh. We have the Eastern Healthcare Preparedness Coalition out of Greenville, and in green we have the Southeastern based out of Wilmington. So you know where your facilities are on this map. They generally take up whole counties, and in some cases counties are shared between the coalitions. But these are your coalitions, and these are the places you have a seat at the table for planning and preparedness purposes. I just want to mention a couple things about the growth or the change in the program over the years. In 2004, we started as a contract with the existing trauma regions. We formed regional advisory committees. And we are focused more on the disaster preparedness around those facilities. In 2006, we began to move toward a more regional approach, but our focus was still primarily on response on the operational assets that we held, and that we still do hold, and on grant management. In 2012, we conducted a federally directed assessment of our system. And in 2014, the results of that assessment we transitioned to a healthcare preparedness regions and coalitions with a broader focus on healthcare infrastructure protection and support, like you saw in that diagram I showed you earlier. So, operational resources. We have many operational resources. Our primary resources we have throughout the state are State Medical Assistance Teams 2, State Medical Assistance Teams Type 3, our ambulance strike teams, and our ambulance buses. I'm just going to go through these and our missions. Our missions, what we do with these resources, our primary missions are medical sheltering, field medical care, alternate care facility support, and other logistical and resource support. Our secondary operational missions are first receiver decontamination operations. We have equipment that we can provide to facilities that receive patients to decontaminate. We also have secondary missions to support primary missions of public health, which are point of distribution operational support. That's when they're distributing pharmaceuticals or vaccines, and also isolation and quarantine support. So as far as our operational resources, we have the capability to support 4 state medical support shelters. They provide sheltering capability for at-risk individuals with special medical needs for 24-hour operation periods. The SMSSs are established to provide medical care and sheltering for up to 25 patients whose needs cannot be met by general population shelters. So these are individuals that cannot be in a general population shelter but are not sick enough to be in a hospital facility. The personnel involved in this type of operation is around 25 individuals, including registered nurses, EMTs, paramedics, respiratory therapists, a doctor, a PA, and a pharmacist. Equipment we have available for this is our SMSS trailers, supply trailers, medical and logistics trailers, our pharmaceutical go packs, and our communication packs. Our field medical stations. We have the capability of Field 2 field medical stations. Their purpose is to provide field medical capability for at-risk individuals with emergent acute care medical needs for 24-hour operational periods. They are established to provide medical care for up to 40 patients whose needs cannot be met by the local healthcare infrastructure. So that means that the community has lost some piece of their healthcare infrastructure. And this operation fills that hole or tries to fill that hole. The personnel needed for this type of operations upwards of 73 individuals, including medical director, medical officer, medical manager, nurse practitioners, paramedics, EMTs, the pharmacist, pharmacy techs, lab techs, radiological technologists, and respiratory therapists. Equipment we pull out to put one of these together includes everything we have in the SMSS, plus our M8 unit, and the pharmacy trailers, our supply trailers, SMAT 3 decontamination trailer, our base camp package, and communications packages. The Type 3 State Medical Assistant Team units, we have 29 of those throughout the state. These are county-based units, so they're not state-level assets. They sit with county EMS and fire, and they're designed to be the first line of response in support of local agencies in the event of a decontamination or a mass medical care event. Their capability is to provide rapid or gross decontamination, basic medical treatment and triage, and responder treatment and rehabilitation. Personnel involved in these operations are paramedics, EMTs, and whatever support staff that they have identified. And their main piece of rolling equipment is a SMAT-3 trailer. Our ambulance strike teams, we have 7 of these across the state. Their mission and capability is to provide advanced emergency medical care and monitoring. Patient movement, they can move up to 120 patients in a 12-hour period. They support our medical units, our field medical stations, our medical support shelters, and they also support facility evacuations. Personnel involved with the ASTs are the strike team leader, logistics personnel, and EMT paramedics that come with the trucks. There are 5 ALS ambulances and 1 AST logistics trailer that make up an ambulance strike team. Ambulance buses. We have 11 of these throughout the state. Their mission and capability is to provide basic emergency medical care and monitoring. Patient movement. They also support our medical units, field medical stations, and medical support shelters. And they also support any kind of facility evacuation operations. The personnel involved here is the bus operator and 3 EMT paramedics and the ambulance bus itself. There's another significant operational resource we have is the Mobile Disaster Hospital. The Mobile Disaster Hospital is located in Mocksville, North Carolina. And it is what we call a medical continuity of operations asset. So again, similar to the field medical station, there's a community that has lost a significant portion of their healthcare infrastructure, a significant portion of their hospital, or perhaps their whole hospital. The Mobile Disaster Hospital is a unit that can fill in that hole. Typically it's deployed and the community is asked to provide the personnel to run it. They're trained, it's deployed, set up. We train the local community to operate, the local caregivers to operate it, and it fills that hole. Operational capabilities, it includes 2 5-bed mobile ED units, which are hard structure. It has a 21-bed emergency department, which is a soft structure, supported by X-ray unit, clinical lab, pharmacy and medical supply, which are all hard structures, and logistical support. It also has a 12-bed ICU with medical supply and logistical support, all hard structure, and 1 operating room with a C-arm and operating microscope with surgical processing, medical supply, and logistical support. This is a picture of our 12-bed ICU. It's a series of Connex containers that are bolted, that are transported via flatbed and then bolted together. This is our 5-bed mobile ED, which is its own trailer that folds out. And this is a picture of our setup in Louisville, Mississippi. I think this is around, I want to say 2015, when, I don't know if you remember, but a tornado went through Louisville, Mississippi and took out their regional health center, destroyed it. Not only does the MDH respond inside the state, like it did for Matthew, it provided a 5-bed ED facility for us in Matthew, but it is deployed out of state to help other communities outside North Carolina. And Mississippi is one of our regional partners in the Southeast region, and they understood, or they knew that the MDH was there. They lost that health center in Louisville. They requested it through our EMAC process, which is state-to-state mutual aid. And we were able to mobilize the MDH and put it in Louisville, get it set up, train the local caregivers in that location, and they were able to operate that center, keep their medical and healthcare staff in the community, which also kept their community alive. And they had that unit there set up like this for, I believe, a year and a half. But you can see the layout here. There's the 5-bed ED unit. There's the pharmacy. There's the 11, at that time it was an 11-bed inpatient. Now it's 12. It has the laboratory, central supply you can't see, but it has shower trailers and so forth. And it is a unit that can provide or fill that lost infrastructure gap. Currently, we just recently brought back a portion of the MDH from Marathon Key, Florida. Pretty much the same setup as you see here. After Irma, Marathon Key lost their regional health center. We set up and we deployed and set up a similar operation to Marathon Key, and it just came back to us 2 weeks ago. We still have another piece. Like I said, we have 2 of these. The other 5-bed ED we sent by boat to St. Croix, Virgin Islands. They sustained damage to their hospital after Hurricane Maria. They lost their surgical capability and some dialysis capability. And so we sent our 5-bed ED down there to fill in that surgical capability for them. We set up, we showed them how it operates, how to use it, and so they could have that capability and not have to continually send their patients off island for care, which was hurting their health outcomes. So also, HPP is also responsible for staffing the ESF8 desk. ESF8 is Emergency Support Function 8. It's the designation for health and medical issues. There are ESF6 covers mass care. That's where you have the North Carolina Baptist Men, Salvation Army, the American Red Cross, and so forth. But I wanted to go over this real quick with you, just so you know how we activate. So an incident occurs, an event or a medical or public health emergency occurs on the local level, and it is anticipated to overwhelm the local or regional medical capabilities. The local EMA notifies the EM duty officer and the state State Operations Center of the incident and the anticipation of state support. The state EM, they determine the need and level for the EOC activation. They activate appropriate group managers. The Emergency Services Group Manager, which is where we fall, the ESF8 falls under Emergency Services, activates or notifies our shift duty officer to activate the desk. And OEMS, our shift duty officer, notifies our leadership. We develop our initial action plan and activation level and staffing, and the SDO and any other assigned staff report to the state EOC and open the desk to handle what we do there. The desk serves as the initial and primary center for coordination of our state medical response system assets, information, and resources. Our primary role is medical resource management, and so once at a local level they determine that they need greater support than what they have on the ground, they're going to activate their memorandums of agreement they have with surrounding counties. They will. It's important that you have a close connection to your local EMA, that they know who you are, where you are, because that is the gateway. That and your coalition are gateways to support. The EMA is someone you need to notify first. As you get involved in your coalitions, you should be sending situation reports to your coalitions as well. If help is needed on a local level, those resource requests for medical support are sent from the local through the Regional Coordination Center. If they have the asset, they will fill the request. If not, they send it up to the state EOC, where our ESG supervisor looks at the request and notifies that we have a medical resource request. They'll send it to our desk. We'll take a look at the request and see if we can support it or not. Usually we can. We send word back down through the Regional Coordination Center that we're going to be able to support the request. And then we contact our SMRS team leader or asset that we have, our operational asset, and deploy them to support whatever the need happens to be. All right. So, North Carolina Risk Management Portal. Anybody familiar with the North Carolina Risk Management Portal? Okay. I've got one back there. So, we've got a lot of operational assets available in the state. Do not write them into your emergency plan. Okay, the idea of emergency preparedness and planning is that you do not, your facilities do not become part of the emergency. So those assets, those state level operational assets we have are things that are out there. They're support for the entire state. What emergency management has put together, one of the tools that they put together for you is the risk management portal. You see you can see it up there, and you can see it on your handout, the URL for that. And what the portal is, it's a tool to help your facility meet your preparedness obligations for risk-based planning, be they through state statute or the CMS emergency preparedness rule, and ensure that you do not become part of the emergency. So after you get to the landing page, there's a number of tabs above. That's the home. The first place you would want to go is mapping and analysis tab. This is where you can start your risk analysis. You'll see here that it has a number of hazards identified, hurricanes, dam failure, coastal flooding, wildfires. So they have this tool help you plan for each of those type of hazards. What's interesting about it is that once you click on one of those, the first thing it's going to ask you is your county address, your county you're in or the address you're at. And once you put that in, what you're going to receive is risk information, hazard information for where you are at for that particular hazard. And that is your starting point to figure out just how vulnerable you may be to these particular hazards. Once you've done that, you go over to planning tools, and you'll see a number of stock plans. One happens to be licensed care facility risk management plan, which is here on the end. Okay, you click on that, it's going to ask you to log in with an NCID. How many of you have NCIDs? Okay, so quite a few of you. If you don't have an NCID, it gives you another pop-up and says, get an NCID. It's very easy to do. The reason it asks you to do that is this is not only the portal provides you a place to help build your plan and store your plan, and a place for you to interact with emergency management, your local emergency management, to review and improve your plan. It sort of operates, if you've never been in there, it sort of operates, does anyone do TurboTax? It's like that. It's going to ask you a series of questions, and you're going to take the information you give it, and it's going to plug it into a plan for you. So it facilitates the development of two documents. Your emergency preparedness plan includes basic information, facility information, your emergency preparedness information, your planning information, any memorandums of agreement. It'll take up your key contacts. It also can produce emergency procedures checklists for various functions. These are procedures that need to be followed during an event, and you can put these checklists at nurse stations and other appropriate places throughout your facilities and train on them. As I said, the template also, or the portal also acts as a document manager for you to maintain and update your plans as needed. Some of the other features that the portal allows you to do, allows you to upload your facility floor plans. You can upload those. Like I said, local EM will have access to this information. It also lets you put together any kind of, you have a generator, it allows you to put that information into the system and into your plan. It has, you can put evacuation routes in the plan. Any memorandum of agreements that you have, it's going to ask you for the information on those, and it's going to add that to your plan. Key contacts that you may have, and also, like I said, the document management part keeps a record of updates. As your plan is updated, you can use this to hold it for future updates. At this point in time, that is all I have on my section. I'm going to hand it over to Nicholas, and he's going to talk to you with a little bit more specifics on healthcare preparedness coalitions. And they are also, this is a tool that EM provides to you. Healthcare coalitions provide many other tools through the HPP program.
Thank you. Good morning. Again, my name is Nicholas Thorpe. I'm with the CAPRAC Healthcare Preparedness Coalition. We take up a 5-county region, which is Franklin, Johnston, Lee, Harnett, and Wake, Franklin counties. I've been on the job for almost 2 years now. I have over 10 years of emergency management experience. And I can tell you one of the worst days of my career was when I got a phone call at 2 o'clock in the morning saying an assisted living facility in South Carolina was evacuating. We had over 100 residents sitting on the curbside watching their facility burn while we tried to figure out what to do and how to do it. They were not licensed by the state, so they were not required to have an emergency preparedness plan in place. And so that caused a lot of problems for us at the state level and at the local level. And so as we work through here, you guys might not be regulated by CMS or really care about the emergency preparedness rule. But what I can tell you is that those who are regulated by the CMS emergency preparedness rule probably thought that they didn't need to worry about this prior to 2016 either. So fair warning, if it came for these 17 provider types, I probably guarantee it's going to happen to you guys as well at some point in the future. But regardless of that, if we can put this in the context of, I might not be required to follow this kind of idea of setting up an emergency management program at my facility. Let's use this as a best practice for what we should do if we want to set up an emergency management program or how to be better prepared for ourselves. Can we agree that's a good mindset to put ourselves in? So where it says should or must, let's say should instead, all right? So to give you a little bit of background, if you're not familiar with the CMS rule, it went into effect in 2017 of last year, affecting 17 different provider types. It breaks down, and I know I'm talking fast, I'm trying to keep us on time, so take notes and ask me questions to repeat, or if I'm going too fast, please slow me down. But it says probably a best practice for setting up an emergency preparedness rule or program is based on 4 key elements. The risk assessment, the actual planning process of what we're going to do and how we're going to do it, emergency policies and procedures to guide us to make sure we're doing what we need to do correctly, communications, how we're going to talk to each other, and of course training and testing. How do we then take all this and implement it and make sure that we build up that muscle memory for when that disaster is going to happen to our facility. Again, CMS came out with this idea, and it affects 17 different provider types. So again, if you're not on this list, you could be in the near future. Or if you're already on this list, you are pretty familiar with this concept as well. This has impacted 17 different provider types across the state, or across the country. So the risk assessment. So we're going to walk through this a little bit as best as we can. But the risk assessment and emergency planning aspect. Then we need to remember, and when you go in to develop your emergency plans, try and make it all hazards. It's not all about that fire. It's not all about that medical emergency. It's about anything that could occur or impact your facility and prevent you from continuing to provide the services that you provide on a day-to-day basis. We call that all hazards. We're not just focusing on that one event. We're focusing on many different events, and how did those responses cross each other? Is the same response for a fire in our facility the same type of response for a flooding in our facility? Very well could match the same response, so that's what we call all hazards. Our planning needs to be driven by this risk assessment. We're going to take a look at our community. We're going to take a look into our facility. We're going to determine what are we at risk of. What could impact our facility? What are those critical functions that we need to be able to perform at all times? And how are we vulnerable to these events that could impact those services? And so we put those in a self-driven risk assessment. Now, your community, they do this on a regular basis. Your county emergency management agency, the state emergency management office as well, they conduct risk assessments already. So why reinvent the wheel? Build up a relationship with your EM, and sometimes you can find this online. You can figure out what the county has determined to be the high-risk events that are going to occur in the county. If it's going to impact the county's ability to provide services, you think it might impact your ability as well. So reach out to your community. At the coalition level, we do this as well. Here in the Caprac region, we took not only the county's risk assessment, but we took all the healthcare facilities that do one already, like hospitals and other healthcare facilities. And we aggregated all that together to come up with a regional hazard and vulnerability assessment or risk assessment. And we're more than welcome to share that with you as well. And we'll break it down a little easier to read. So reach out to your community, figure out what your risk what the county's at risk for, and then use that to develop your own specific facility. Whereas the Wake County's #1 problem is maybe a hazmat incident on a highway, that might not necessarily impact your facility, or you might not be as vulnerable to that incident as the county might be. But maybe you're more susceptible to a medical emergency or an active assailant, which is what you guys are going to be talking about later today, or an evacuation of some sort, or inclement weather. So as you identify those issues, that's going to help drive this planning process and preparedness process for you guys to be better prepared. I highly recommend that you make sure that your planning accounts for your residents or patients requiring special assistance. Think of it this way: if your patients or residents had to leave your facility, or who in your community that you manage is going to require more resources or have a tougher time coping with that disaster or emergency that's going to impact your area. Make sure your plans account for those individuals. Services the facility would be able to provide during an emergency. The greatest way to get in and develop that relationship with county emergency management and other first responder agencies is not only look to what can I get from guys like me from the coalition level or our emergency management partners, but what can I provide? We did an exercise recently where we identified that long-term care facilities that weren't able to take in displaced patients or displaced residents from a different location. They might not have space for them, but what they did identify was that they could provide meals and feeding services. And so here in the Caprac region, we discovered that we could provide up to 300 specialized meals for up to at least 7 days. And so that was something that we discovered that if it wasn't for our partners looking at the glass in that concept of, well, I don't need help, but I can provide help, it helps build that better relationship. And I think that's what a lot of local governments and emergency management want to also learn from. It's not always call me when you need me, it's call and offer some service or some help as well. And again, we're always looking for that collaboration with emergency management and the Healthcare Preparedness Coalition. That's only going to build up your capabilities and resources. Policies and procedures, sort of how we get the job done once that emergency starts happening. This includes how does alternate power generation start up, shelter in place versus evacuation procedures, maintaining medical records, how are you going to bring in volunteers to help support your organization if your staff has been impacted by this event. I've seen a lot of plans where it says if we have an event, especially a snowstorm, that we're going to bring in not only all our staff, but we're also going to let them bring their families in. Well, who's going to watch after the kids, right? That's always an issue. So how are you going to bring in other volunteer organizations such as the Baptist Men who have a child care mission to watch after the children, or like Joe said, the SMAT teams, the Medical Reserve Corps, which we'll talk about here in a little bit, or various elements of the American Red Cross. How are you going to bring them in to help during that? Again, as you develop your policies and procedures, they must align, or they should align with your risk assessment. Why plan for something if it's not going to impact your facility, right? You know, we need to prepare for a volcano. That's about the one hazard in North Carolina we really don't have to worry about. So communications plan, how are we going to talk to each other? How are you going to talk to your staff? Do you have multiple ways of communicating with your staff? Do you have multiple ways of communicating with your residents, family members, or representatives? Again, we learned recently in an exercise that a lot of our healthcare facilities only have 2 ways of receiving information, phone and email. Well, if they weren't at their computer to receive their email, they missed our alert notification. If they didn't pick up their phone, they missed our request for help. I'm sure that's the same way with your staff in your facility. So what are some alternate ways that you can reach out and touch the people that you need to communicate with during that disaster? And this is something the coalition, Healthcare Preparedness Coalition, is working on with various different apps and best practices. Great best practice that we discovered was if you are on a Verizon system, maybe having another phone or having your second in command be on Sprint or some other network. So when one system goes down, maybe the other system's still up, and we see that happen all the time. And so that's just one best practice that we've discovered. How are you going to talk to patients, physicians, other facilities, volunteers? Again, the more you are up to date on your communications plan, I think the easier your response is going to go. The adage is that anytime in emergency management, we review how we did in our response phase. Communications is always the big one that comes up as what we could do better. So we need to make sure that our contact lists are up to date, and we put those plans and policies and procedures in place for knowing how we can communicate to each other more efficiently and effectively. Then the big one that we deal with on a regular basis is that training and exercising. Why put all this work in developing what could happen to us? What are we going to do when that happens to us? The policies and procedures that are going to guide us on how we are going to respond if we're not going to test or train on it. And this is something the coalition does on a regular basis, and we work with many different facilities to develop different types of exercises. This can be as simple as sitting in a room like this and us talking out an issue for a couple hours. It could be us actually practicing a very specific function that you want to address, like how are we going to turn off valves, or how are we where are all the pull stations for the fire alarm, to actual full-scale event. Or now we're going to move people around. We're going to activate our emergency plans, our emergency command center in our facility. We're actually going to call in first responders to come help us figure out how we're going to work together once everyone is at our facility collectively. And again, this also needs to align with our risk assessment. Again, why are we going to train and practice for a volcano if it's not going to happen? If your big worry is a fire, how often are you doing fire drills and talking about the policies and procedures that are going to govern how you're going to respond to that kind of event? And you should do this regularly. CMS will tell you that you should do this at least, you should or must do this annually. And I think that's best practice across the board in emergency management and first response, is the more you practice this, the more muscle memory you're going to develop. Again, if you were a long-term care facility and you're governed by CMS, you have to have alternate power generation capabilities. I don't know if this actually speaks to you guys or not, but again, things to think about and invest in when you're talking about emergency power. Make sure that it is running your sanitary and storage provisions. Make sure it's powering your refrigeration, at least your emergency lights, and then your fire suppression systems, and then the big one that we see a lot is your temperature. Anyone see what happened in Moore County on Saturday? A nursing home or a healthcare facility in Moore County had to evacuate. They lost power for 5 hours, and the expected temperature in the cafeteria was around 80 degrees inside. And they decided to evacuate. So when you're thinking about extra power, make sure you're including your HVAC system. And I'll talk about a little bit about some of the resources that we at the coalition level can bring to your aid to keep your people comfortable and safe at your facility, because the last thing we want you to do is evacuate. We'd rather bring in resources to keep you where you are, because that's just going to put more strain and stress on your systems and on your residents if we had to relocate them. We'll skip through that. Again, the Healthcare Preparedness Coalition, we saw this earlier. The state, Joe did a great job talking about this. We mirror this at the local level, so we're looking, at the local level of all these different agencies, long-term care included, all the different 17 provider types under CMS, hospitals, EMS, emergency management, public health. We all try and bring them together to talk about how, as a coalition, we can increase the readiness of our healthcare infrastructure, which includes everyone here in this room. So, healthcare preparedness coalitions and medical readiness. So we have a plethora of capabilities at our disposal that we can bring to your aid to help you prepare for that disaster or respond to that emergency that's happening. This includes risk and resource assessment. We can come and help you develop those risk assessments. Train and prepare medical workforce. We have a robust training program that we can bring to help you guys get more in line with best practices across the country through the Incident Command System. We just did a medical preparedness and response to bombing incidents course a couple weeks ago. So I know that's a little on the extreme end of the spectrum, but we definitely lean on our partners and our coalitions to tell us what they're more concerned about in preparing for those disasters and emergencies, and we work to provide those trainings to you guys for free in most cases. So to give you a little idea of what we do, trainings, incident command, evacuations, continuity of operations, how to develop those exercises, decontamination, of course, first aid, CPR. We develop workshops, and one workshop that we did a couple weeks ago was transportation workshop, where we're trying to solve the problem of how to get dialysis patients from their homes or their place of living to their dialysis center during inclement weather events. And then again, we can help facilitate, coordinate, develop emergency exercises. So we do this on a regular basis. If it's something that your facility wants to look into, you can work with us at the coalition level, and we can help develop or facilitate an exercise at your facility, or help coordinate your exercise along with exercises that are already planned, or better connect you with emergency management at the local level to help develop those exercises and facilitate those. We are regional, so everything we do is bent on a regional a slant, if you will. So we're trying to make sure that our region is well prepared for that disaster or emergency that should occur. And that is what our response coordination through strategy, resources, and communications all are focused on. Is how well can we communicate with you, strategize with you guys, and leverage our resources to better prepare our region for that emergency. We do this through linking you guys to emergency management, public health, through other facilities, so we can all come together, sing Kumbaya, and help each other, work in those medical surge type events. We also worked for improving the responder safety and health. So it's not just about our residents or patients, it's about you guys as well. How can we provide training or resources to keep you guys more safe while you're providing the care and services that you guys provide on a regular basis. Again, Joe talked about the surge capabilities, so if you guys are having a surge of people coming into your facility and requiring help or need, we can leverage resources to come to you, or if you are no longer to stay in your facility, we have resources that we can bring to bear so that your patients remain comfortable. And this is what we did during Hurricane Matthew. We set up a special medical needs shelter in Goldsboro, where we did take in long-term care patients that were evacuated not only from nursing homes, but other assisted living facilities as well. We do this by leveraging our SMAC2 team, so the State Medical Assistance Team. And when we say type, it just means size and capability. So type 1 being the biggest and baddest team out there. Type 2, we're just as up there, all the way down to level 5, or type 5, which is probably some guy like me who knows a little bit about medical care and can work. These guys are state resources that come out and when a mission has been identified through OEMS or NCEM and help provide that expert medical care and logistical packages that Joe talked about earlier. Medical Reserve Corps, which is my side of the house, is a volunteer program. It's nationwide. It's comprised of medical and non-medical volunteers who are able to come in and help and assist during localized or regional events that don't maybe reach that big disaster level. And each of our teams across the state comprise of an SMAC2 and an MRC program. And then Joe talked about the SMAC3s. So this is just what we do. So we specialize in special events, public health emergencies, or disasters. And this can be at a facility level, or it could be at a regional level or local level. So that's us at First Night Raleigh, providing medical care. We support various football, soccer games throughout our county. And that's us working in Goldsboro at the State Medical Support Shelter. So again, we're trying to find ways that we can have a positive impact in preparing our healthcare infrastructure in our region. So we like to say we're sort of the problem solvers for healthcare. So if you're having a problem, feel free to call the coalition. We can either give you work to provide you resources, find you a best practice, or work with you on your planning side of the house as well. So how else can we assist you? Again, we can assist you with providing rehab, event support, CMS technical assistance, again, if that applies to you, and decontamination, which hopefully you never have to experience. That's a hard one to crack. And then we help facilitate that collaboration between public health, EMS, emergency management, public health, and other agencies throughout that county. So if you're having a tough time cracking that egg, we can work to help facilitate and help you guys find opportunities to build those relationships. Again, we can help you as participants, evaluators, players, or facilitators of your emergency exercises. And then we can actually help you during those times of emergencies or disasters, and especially if they involve the Red Cross. We're just as capable and work with the Red Cross in our region closely during events that impact different healthcare facilities. So in your packet, we included the contact information and the websites for each of the regions' healthcare coalitions. So in the east, there you go. If you're in the central, you have a lot of options, but we're here at CAPRAC. My boss, Janice Brown, is in the back, who's our team leader for the Healthcare Preparedness Coalition. And then again, if you find yourself in the Duke region or in the Mid-Carolina region, Chapel Hill, those are their contact information. Out west, out of Mission Health and Baptist Hospital. And that is the end of my part of my presentation. Questions, comments, concerns? I know I went real fast. For either me or Joe. We'll be around for a little bit later today, so feel free to grab us.
Thank you both to Joe and Nicholas. Let's give